My name is Nora Whitfield. I am 31 years old, and I was the only person in the room when my mother took her last breath. My father was not outside filling out paperwork. My older sister was not stuck in traffic. My brother was not in the hospital parking garage looking for a space. They knew where we were. They knew how close she was. They had seen every message I sent. And while my mother's fingers were turning cold inside my hand, my family was 7 miles away at my father's house, drinking wine beside a catered dinner they had labeled a private family prayer. At 10:18 p.m., my mother opened her eyes one last time and looked past me toward the 3 empty chairs by the window. She had asked for those chairs to stay there all afternoon. One for my father, Richard. One for my sister, Vanessa. One for my brother, Caleb. They never came. When the monitor changed from a broken rhythm into one long, flat sound, a nurse named Tessa Kim turned off the alarm and placed a sealed cream envelope on the blanket beside my mother's hand. "She made me promise," Tessa whispered, "that you would get this after she was gone. Not before." My hands were shaking so badly, I almost tore the paper opening it. Inside was a small brass key wrapped in tissue, a photograph cut in half, and a letter written in my mother's careful handwriting. The first line said, "Nora, if your father tells you I wanted to be alone, he is lying." The second line said, "Do not trust the people who missed my last breath." I read it 3 times before the meaning reached me. Then my phone rang. It was my father. He did not ask if she suffered. He did not ask whether she said goodbye. He did not ask if I was safe to drive home. He said, "Your mother wanted peace at the end. I hope you respected that." I looked at the empty chairs. Then I looked at the key. My voice sounded far away when I answered. "Dad, Mom left me a letter." There was silence, not grief, not surprise, fear. Before I tell you what my mother hid for me and why my father needed everyone to believe she died alone by choice, tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I want to know how far a mother's final warning can travel when the family she loved tried to bury it with her. My mother's name was Eleanor Whitfield. To most people in Brookhaven, she was known as Ellie. She taught 5th grade for 28 years, baked orange rolls every Christmas, and wrote thank you cards in blue ink because she said black ink made gratitude look like a bill. She was not dramatic. She was not suspicious. She was not the kind of woman who saw evil in every shadow. That is why the letter frightened me more than any scream could have. My father had been telling people for months that Mom wanted quiet. He used that word constantly after her diagnosis. Quiet visits, quiet decisions, quiet goodbyes. If someone from the church wanted to stop by, he said Mom was too tired. If my aunt called, he said Mom was resting. If I asked why her phone went straight to voicemail, he said she had asked for less noise. The first time he said she wanted to be alone at the end, I hated the sentence. But I almost believed it because my father had always sounded reasonable when he was doing something cruel. He never shouted if a calm explanation would work better. That was his gift. He could make control sound like care. My father stood behind her chair that day, one hand on the back cushion, looking like a grieving husband from a church newsletter. Vanessa was beside him, scrolling through her phone. She is 4 years older than me, elegant in the way people become when they practice being photographed. She owned a boutique event company that never seemed to make money, though she always had new shoes. Caleb, my brother, was 33, handsome, charming, and permanently between business ventures. My mother used to say Caleb was finding his road. My father said the same thing until finding his road started costing other people money. I was the only one who asked Mom directly what she wanted. "Do you want fewer visitors?" I asked. Her eyes moved quickly to my father, then back to me. "That depends," she said. "On what?" "On who decides what fewer means." My father laughed softly. "She's tired, Nora. Don't turn every conversation into a committee." Mom's mouth closed. I should have heard the warning in that silence. But I was still the youngest daughter. I was still the one who had spent most of her life translating my father's sharpness into something less painful. I told myself Mom was weak from treatment. I told myself Dad was scared. I told myself Vanessa and Caleb were absent because people handle illness differently. That is the kind of lie love tells before truth starts charging interest. The final week of Mom's life was a blur of hospital lights, plastic cups of ice water, and my father's voice in the hallway saying, "Eleanor has made her wishes clear." But Mom had not made anything clear to me. She kept trying to speak when I was alone with her. The problem was that we were almost never alone. Dad was always near the door. Vanessa kept appearing at strange times with fresh flowers. Caleb visited just long enough to take a picture with his hand on Mom's blanket, then disappeared for calls he called urgent. 3 days before she died, Mom grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Nora," she whispered, "if he says I signed it, ask which hand." I leaned closer. "What, Mom? Signed what?" The door opened before she could answer. Vanessa came in holding a latte and a concerned expression. "Are we upsetting Mom?" "We. Not you. We." A small word that pushed me back into the group and erased what had nearly been said. Mom let go of my wrist. That night, Dad told me the doctors believed she needed comfort care only. I asked to speak to Dr. Mira Sayegh, Mom's cardiologist. Dad said she had already left the case. That was another lie. I found out later Dr. Sayegh had been removed after objecting to a medical proxy Dad presented with Caleb as witness and Vanessa as secondary decision-maker. According to that document, Mom had supposedly signed away her right to challenge his decisions 3 weeks earlier. But my mother's right hand had been too weak to hold a pen by then. And she had been left-handed her entire life. At the hospital, after she died, I took the envelope into the chapel and read the rest of the letter under a stained glass window that turned my hands blue and red. "Nora, your father will say I chose silence. I did not. He will say I refused visitors. I did not. He will say I was confused. I was not. There is a deposit box under my maiden name at Meridian Trust. The brass key opens the first lock. Ask for box 612. Do not go to your father's attorney. Do not tell Vanessa. Do not confront Caleb. Call Rebecca Vale before you call the police. She will remember the summer house." At the bottom, Mom had written one final line so hard the pen had nearly cut the paper. They needed me quiet before probate. Probate. The word made no sense at first. Then it made too much sense. My father had asked about Mom's will before the sheet was even pulled over her face. The photograph in the envelope showed my mother in her 20s, standing beside another woman outside a small cedar house near the water. The other woman had been torn away from the picture, leaving only one hand visible on Mom's shoulder. On the back, Mom had written, "Rebecca knows why I stayed." I did not sleep that night. At 6:30 the next morning, I drove to Meridian Trust. The bank sat downtown inside a stone building with brass doors and a lobby that smelled like leather and old money. I gave the woman at the desk the key and my mother's maiden name, Eleanor Hale. Her expression changed when she typed it. "Please wait here, Ms. Whitfield." 20 minutes later, a manager named Mr. Pierce brought me into a private room. He carried a folder instead of the box. "Someone attempted access yesterday evening," he said. "My mother died yesterday evening." "I'm aware. That is why the request was denied." "Who came?" He slid a copy of the sign-in sheet across the table. "Richard Whitfield." My father had gone to the bank less than 2 hours after my mother died. He had presented a notarized authorization claiming he controlled all of her financial and personal records due to incapacity. "The authorization was dated last Thursday," Mr. Pierce said. "But Mrs. Whitfield visited us personally 10 days ago and changed the access instructions. She anticipated this." A strange pride rose inside my grief. Even dying, my mother had outplanned him. Box 612 was larger than I expected. Inside was a red ledger, an old cassette tape, a flash drive taped inside a greeting card, and a small envelope marked second key. There was also a handwritten note. "Nora, listen before you read. Grief will make you search for mercy where there is evidence. Listen first. The room had a cassette player for old records. Mr. Pierce stepped outside. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, faint but unmistakable. "Nora, my sweet girl, if you are hearing this, I am gone or too far trapped to speak. I am sorry. I tried to protect you by keeping you outside the ugliest parts of this family. That was my mistake. Secrets do not spare children. They only decide when the wound opens." I covered my mouth. She continued. "Your father has been draining the Briar House Trust for 14 years. It was created by your grandmother Hale after the settlement from the Morrow chemical spill. Half was meant for our family line. Half was meant for workers and their children who were harmed. Richard used my marriage to gain access, then convinced people I was too fragile to manage it. Vanessa helped launder payments through her event company. Caleb created consulting invoices for projects that never existed. The air left my lungs. Briar House Trust. I had heard the name only once as a child, when Mom's mother died. After that, my father said it was tied up in legal paperwork and too boring for children. Mom's tape clicked, then continued. "When I found the new transfers, I contacted Rebecca Vale. Your father will describe her as unstable. That is because he made the world believe she betrayed me before she could testify against him. She did betray me, but not the way he says. Listen anyway. Also find Dr. Sayeg. Find Tessa Kim. Find Owen Mercer. The truth is safer in pieces until you know who deserves all of it." I paused the tape. The second key opened a locker at Harbor Station, according to a tag taped beneath it. I called Owen first. He answered on the third ring. "Nora, I need help. My mother left your name." He was silent for 1 second. Then he said, "Do not use your regular email. Do not go home if you think someone knows you have documents. Where are you?" That was how I learned Mom had already contacted him. He met me at a coffee shop 20 minutes later, wearing a gray coat and the expression of a man who had expected bad news and received worse. I showed him the ledger. He did not touch it at first. "Your mother brought me partial records 6 weeks ago," he said. "She believed money was being moved out of a restricted trust. I asked for full statements. She disappeared from communication 2 days later. She was hospitalized. She told me if that happened, it would not be an accident." My stomach turned. We went to Harbor Station together. Locker 19C was in a corridor behind the old ticket machines. The second key turned with a reluctant click. Inside was a padded envelope containing bank statements, 2 phones wrapped in aluminum foil, and a manila folder labeled Sunbridge. Before I could open it, Owen raised his hand. A reflection moved in the dark window behind us. Someone was standing at the end of the locker corridor. Not a traveler, not lost, watching. Owen took the envelope from my hands and slid it inside his coat. "Walk," he said softly. We moved toward the exit at a normal pace. The man followed. When we reached the main concourse, Owen stepped into a crowd near a delayed bus announcement. The man quickened his pace. I saw a navy jacket, trimmed beard, and a silver ring with the Whitfield Development crest. My brother had given those rings to his groomsmen 2 years earlier. Caleb. Or someone wearing Caleb's ring. We exited through the taxi line and got into the first cab Owen could stop. He gave the driver an address 3 blocks from his office, not the office itself. Only after we had switched cars twice did he open the envelope. The bank statements showed $7. $8 million moved through 3 shell companies, 2 of them tied to my father, 1 connected to Vanessa's event business. The phones contained text messages between Dad, Vanessa, and Caleb. Vanessa, "Mom is asking for the Hale folder again. Keep Nora away tonight. Dad, Nora believes what she is told if the sentence sounds sad enough. Caleb, Sayeg is a problem. Dad, then remove her." Another message made my hands go numb. Caleb, "She refused the proxy." Vanessa, "Then stop asking." Dad, "We already have what we need." Owen photographed everything and made duplicate images of the phones. He insisted we secure the originals in his firm's evidence safe before I contacted anyone else. Your father has resources, he said. If this is what it looks like, he will not argue. He will erase. That afternoon, I called Rebecca Vale from a prepaid phone. She did not say hello. She said, "Eleanor is dead, isn't she?" My throat tightened. Yes. Then Richard finally ran out of patience. "Who are you?" She stared at me as if the answer cost something. "Your aunt." My mother had told me her sister died before I was born. Rebecca laughed when I said that, but there was no humor in it. "No, Richard killed me socially. Your mother helped bury the body." Piece by piece, she told me what happened 22 years earlier. "You took money to disappear," I said. "I did," Rebecca answered. "At Mom's expense. At everyone's expense." Her honesty was not clean. It did not ask to be admired. She handed me a shoebox filled with old letters Mom had sent after I was born. In several, Mom begged Rebecca to come forward. In one, dated 8 months before her death, Mom wrote, "Richard is doing it again, but this time the children are involved. Vanessa signs what flatters her. Caleb signs what feeds him. Nora still believes us worth saving. I need to be brave before she pays the price for my silence." I read that line until it blurred. Rebecca turned away. She contacted me again when she found the new shell companies. I asked for my full share before testifying. I looked up. "You tried to bargain with her." I was angry. She was dying. And I was still selfish. It was the first apology in the story that did not come dressed as a reason. Rebecca gave me the name of an attorney Mom had consulted, Amelia Hart. She also gave me a warning. Richard does not fear being hated. He fears being documented. I left with the shoebox and drove straight to Owen's office. By then, Dad had called 9 times. Vanessa had texted 4. "Dad, your mother's funeral arrangements require unity. Call me." Vanessa, "I know you're upset, but don't make private grief public. Caleb, whatever Mom gave you, Dad says it might be legally invalid. Don't get yourself in trouble." I did not answer. That silence changed the weather around them. She had Mom's signed statement, witnessed 12 days before death. In it, Mom declared she was mentally competent, that she feared medical and financial coercion, and that any document produced by my father or children limiting her access to treatment or communication should be presumed suspect. She wanted emergency court intervention, Amelia said. We were preparing the filing when she was moved into hospice. After that, I was denied access. By my father? By your father, your sister, and a hospital administrator who suddenly became very interested in liability. Amelia slid another document across the table. It was a draft petition appointing me temporary protector of the Briar House Trust if Mom became incapacitated. Why didn't she tell me? She thought you would run straight into the fire before we had enough proof. I almost smiled because she was right. Then Amelia showed me the document that changed everything. A trust amendment signed by my grandmother, Mom, and Rebecca years earlier. It named my mother as primary protector and me as successor if Mom became incapacitated or died. It also explicitly barred my father from managing, borrowing against, or benefiting from the injured worker portion. This is a certified copy, Amelia said. Your mother believed the original was hidden at the summer house. The one in the photograph? Yes, she said if your father discovered the certified copy, he would argue it was incomplete. We need the original. We planned to go the next morning. That night, I did the hardest acting of my life. I called my father. He answered immediately. Nora, thank God, I was worried sick. His worry sounded polished. I'm sorry, I said. I haven't been thinking clearly. His breathing shifted. That is understandable. You watched something terrible. Mom's letter upset me. What did it say? Mostly goodbye. Some things that didn't make sense. Your mother was very confused near the end. I know. I hated myself for saying it, but Amelia had told me confidence was safer than confrontation. Let him think the old system still worked. Let him believe sadness made me manageable. Dad exhaled. Come to dinner tomorrow, just family. We need to discuss the will before outside people make this uglier. Vanessa and Caleb will be there? Of course. Okay. The dinner was at my father's house, beneath the same banner from the night Mom died. Family comes first. No one had taken it down. Vanessa hugged me too hard at the door. You scared us, she whispered. Caleb kissed the top of my head like I was a child. Dad had set Mom's chair at the table, but removed her place setting. That detail made me want to overturn the table. Instead, I sat. I wore a small recording device clipped beneath my blouse. Amelia knew. Owen knew. I knew. My family did not. At first, they performed concern. Vanessa talked about grief counseling. Caleb talked about probate deadlines. Dad served roast chicken and poured Mom's favorite white wine into glasses none of us touched. Then he placed a document beside my plate. It would simplify everything if you signed this. What is it? A temporary estate cooperation agreement. Vanessa added, just so Dad can keep things moving. Caleb said, you don't want lawyers eating up Mom's money. I looked at the first page. It gave Dad authority to manage all estate assets, waive claims against prior trustees, and review any personal documents Mom had left outside the official estate file. In plain English, it gave him permission to take the evidence. I picked up the pen. Dad watched me. Vanessa stopped blinking. Caleb leaned back with the smile he used when a deal was nearly closed. I touched the pen to the signature line. Then I looked up. Did Mom really say she wanted to be alone? Dad's face softened instantly. She did. When? The day before the end. Was Dr. Sayegh there? The softness froze. No. Tessa Kim? Vanessa cut in. Nora, why are you interrogating him? I just want to understand. Dad's voice lowered. Your mother wanted peace. She did not want your panic filling the room. There it was, the hook beneath the lie. My presence had been recast as harm. My absence had been required as mercy. Then why did she leave me a letter saying not to trust you? The room stopped. Caleb's glass clicked against the table. Vanessa whispered, you said it was confused. I lied. Dad stared at me for a long time. Then the grieving husband vanished. You have no idea what you are holding. No, I said. But I know you tried to get into box 612 after the funeral. His eyes moved before his face did. That was enough. I stood. Dad did too. You are making a mistake. Vanessa reached for my wrist. Don't leave angry. I pulled away. You don't get to touch me after leaving Mom's chairs empty. Caleb blocked the hallway. I looked at him. Move. He smiled. Or what? Behind me, my father said quietly, let her go. She will come back when she realizes no one outside this family is going to protect her. For once, he miscalculated. Because people outside the family already had. At 6:10 the next morning, Owen, Amelia, Rebecca, and I drove to the summer house. It sat at the end of a gravel road near Lake Alder, hidden behind cedars and blackberry thorns. The paint had peeled from the porch. The windows were filmed with dust. But the front door opened with the key Rebecca had kept on a chain around her neck for 20 years. Inside, the air smelled like closed rooms and old wood. Rebecca stood in the doorway, trembling. My mother loved this place, she said. Richard hated it because it was the only house where no one treated him like the sender. We searched for 3 hours. The kitchen held rusted pans. The bedrooms held sheet-covered furniture. The attic held boxes of lesson plans, Christmas ornaments, and my grandmother's gardening gloves. No original amendment. Then Owen found scratches near the baseboard under the stairs. A panel opened behind a stack of old paint cans. Inside was a metal fireproof case. The case held the original Breyer House Trust Amendment, a second cassette tape, and a sealed envelope addressed to my father. Mom had written on it, "Give this to Richard only when he is no longer able to bargain." We took photographs before moving anything. That is why we were still inside when the SUV arrived. Caleb stepped out first, holding a crowbar. Vanessa came behind him, crying already, which meant she expected crying to be useful. Dad got out last. He did not look surprised to see Rebecca. He looked annoyed. "You always were expensive to keep buried," he said. Rebecca flinched but did not step back. Amelia was already on the phone with the sheriff. Dad saw the case in my hands. "Nora," he said calmly, "bring that to me." "No, you do not understand what your mother did." "I understand enough." He looked at Caleb. My brother moved toward me. Owen stepped in front of him. "Touch her and this becomes assault in front of an attorney." Caleb laughed, but he stopped. Vanessa cried harder. "Please, Nora." Dad was trying to protect the family. Mom was going to destroy everything. What everything? Our name. There it was again. Not people, not patients, not the injured workers whose money had been stolen. The name. Dad turned on her. "Be quiet." But Vanessa was unraveling. "You said the medication would only keep her calm. You said if she got surgery, she would talk to Sayeg again. You said Nora would forgive us once the estate settled." Amelia's phone was recording. Dad realized it too late. His hand shot toward Vanessa, not to strike her, but to silence her mouth. Caleb grabbed his arm. Owen pulled me toward the porch. Rebecca stood between Dad and the stairwell panel like she was guarding a grave. For one chaotic minute, everybody spoke at once. Then police sirens cut through the trees. Dad changed instantly, his hands lowered, his voice softened. He became the respectable widower again before the first deputy reached the porch. "This is a family misunderstanding," he said. Amelia stepped forward. "No, this is attempted interference with trust evidence, coercion, and possibly elder abuse connected to an ongoing probate fraud." The deputy looked at my father, then at Amelia's bar card, then at the case in my hands. For the first time in my life, my father's title did not clear the room. It only became another fact someone wrote down. The investigation did not explode publicly that day. Real justice is slow. It signs forms. It asks for copies. It schedules interviews for Tuesday morning and subpoenas bank accounts 3 weeks later. But inside my family, everything cracked at once. Vanessa gave a statement within 48 hours. She admitted routing trust payments through her event company. She claimed Dad told her the money was family income being reorganized. She admitted deleting voicemails from Mom's phone after the hospital restricted calls. She said she believed Mom was being paranoid. Then she said something I will never forget. "I knew she wanted Nora. I just thought it was better if Nora didn't make things harder." Harder. My mother was dying, and my presence was considered difficult because truth might enter the room with me. Caleb lasted longer. He denied everything until Owen's digital report traced the medical proxy file to his laptop, created 4 days after the supposed signing date. The notary stamp had been inserted as a scanned image. The witness signature belonged to a man who was on a cruise when the document was dated. Faced with federal charges, Caleb began cooperating. He surrendered messages Dad thought had been erased. "Dad, she is calling Sayeg again." "Stop it, Caleb. I can block the number from her phone." "Dad, do that. Also find the original Hale Amendment." "Vanessa, what about Nora?" "Dad, Nora will mourn whatever story we hand her." That line reached me through Amelia in a printed evidence packet. "Nora will mourn whatever story we hand her." I sat in my car outside Amelia's office and stared at it until my hands stopped shaking. For years, my family had treated me as emotional, too sensitive, too earnest, too likely to cry. They were right about one thing. I did feel deeply, but they confused feeling with weakness. Grief did not make me stupid. Love did not make me blind forever. And once my mother's final letter showed me the shape of the lie, every feeling I had became fuel. Dr. Sayeg testified that Mom had been competent when she requested the valve procedure. The procedure had risk, but it also had potential. Mom had understood both. Tessa Kim produced photographs of medication bottles brought from home by Vanessa, bottles whose labels did not match the hospital chart. A pharmacy review showed sedatives inconsistent with Mom's treatment plan. Prosecutors could not prove the medication alone caused Mom's death. That truth matters. Stories like this become too easy when every wrong has one clean charge. Real harm hides in the spaces between signatures, phone calls, missing witnesses, and people choosing not to ask questions. They proved medical interference. They proved document fraud. They proved financial exploitation. They proved obstruction. And they proved that my father had worked for months to make my mother's silence look voluntary. The benefit was held at the Brookhaven Arts Hall. There were white roses everywhere. A 20-foot photograph of Mom smiled from the stage. My father stood beneath it in a black suit, speaking about devotion, dignity, and Eleanor's wish for unity. I arrived halfway through his speech. Rebecca walked beside me. Dr. Sayej, Tessa Kim, Owen, Amelia, and 2 investigators followed. Conversations died, row by row. Dad kept smiling. "Nora," he said into the microphone, "this is not the time for private grief." I walked to the front. "You made my grief public when you lied about Mom's last wish." Security moved toward me, then stopped when the board chair raised his hand. Amelia had obtained an emergency order that afternoon, recognizing the Breyer House Amendment and suspending Dad's authority pending review. The board chair took the microphone from my father. Then the screens changed. Mom appeared, not the memorial photograph, a video. She was sitting in the sunroom, scarf around her head, hands folded in her lap. "My name is Eleanor Hale Whitfield," she said. "I am mentally competent. If this recording is being played, it means I was prevented from speaking for myself while alive." A sound moved through the ballroom. Not a gasp exactly. More like the room inhaling too late. Mom continued. "My husband, Richard Whitfield, has diverted funds from the Breyer House Trust. My children Vanessa and Caleb assisted him through false invoices, restricted communication, and documents I did not sign. My daughter Nora did not know. She was kept outside the truth because she was the one most likely to stop it." I could not breathe. On the screen, Mom looked directly into the camera. "Richard will say I wanted peace. What I wanted was time. Time to testify. Time to repair what silence allowed. If I died before that happened, then I ask the trustees, the court, and my daughter to tell the truth completely." The video shifted to scanned account records. Then text messages. Then Dr. Sayeg's medical notes. Then Tessa's photographs of the medication bottles. Dad stepped toward the control booth. 2 investigators stepped in front of him. Vanessa entered through a side door with her attorney. Her face was pale. Caleb followed a few minutes later, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Dad turned toward them. "You ungrateful fools." That was the moment the audience understood. Not from the documents. Not from the law. From the way his mask slipped when the people he had used stopped staying used. Vanessa began crying, but this time her tears were not a weapon. They were useless, and she knew it. "He told us Mom would ruin everything," she said. "He said she was confused. He said Nora would lose the house, the accounts, everything if Mom kept digging." Dad lunged toward her. Officers caught him before he reached the stage steps. As they placed him in handcuffs, he looked at me with a hatred so cold it felt almost familiar. "You think she was innocent?" he said. "Ask Rebecca why she disappeared." Rebecca stepped forward before I could speak. "I disappeared because I was greedy and afraid," she said. "Eleanor stayed because she was trying to save children who did not deserve the cost." Richard stole from the trust. I helped him once. Eleanor stopped us. That is the truth. Dad stared at her. For the first time, no one rushed to fill the silence for him. He had spent decades surviving inside other people's hesitation. That night, hesitation ended. The legal process lasted 16 months. Forensic accountants traced $8.9 million through my father's companies, Vanessa's vendor accounts, Caleb's consulting invoices, and property transfers connected to developments Dad had publicly praised as community investments. Several injured workers and families who should have received trust support had been denied benefits because the fund was supposedly underperforming. It was not underperforming, it was being emptied. My father was convicted of financial fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, elder exploitation, and falsifying medical authority documents. He received 17 years in federal prison. The prosecution could not charge him with murder. I need to say that because truth matters, even when grief wants stronger words. But they proved he interfered with care that could have given my mother more time. Sometimes justice cannot name every wound. It can only prove enough to stop the hand holding the knife. Vanessa took a plea. She served time, paid restitution, and was permanently barred from managing charitable or estate funds. Her event company collapsed before sentencing. Caleb cooperated after the digital forensics became impossible to deny. He received a shorter sentence than my father and longer shame than he expected. He writes me twice a year. I do not answer. Rebecca surrendered any personal claim beyond what an independent court determined was rightfully hers. She testified fully, including against herself. Her punishment was lighter because her confession completed the older fraud, but she lost the one thing she had guarded most fiercely, the story where she was only a victim. Briar House was placed under independent oversight. The recovered money went first to the injured workers and families my grandmother intended to protect. With part of my lawful share, I helped create a patient advocacy fund for people whose relatives misuse medical proxies, financial authority, or the language of peace to isolate them. Tessa joined the advisory board. Dr. Sayeg helped rewrite hospital escalation rules. Owen refused public credit, but still guards the digital archive like my mother might call and ask for a status update. Months after my father's sentencing, Meridian Trust called me. Box 612 had been inspected for closure. Beneath the velvet lining, they found one more envelope. This one had no keys, no ledgers, no names. Only my name. Nora. I sat in the same private room where I had first heard her tape and opened my mother's final letter. My dearest girl, if you are reading this, then the battle reached you, and I am sorry. A mother should leave recipes, stories, and warm sweaters. Not instructions, not evidence. I stayed too long in a marriage where truth was treated as disloyalty. I told myself I was protecting you by keeping the family together. I was wrong. A family held together by silence is not whole. It is only quiet. Your father did not begin by stealing money. He began by asking me to make one thing easier, then another, then another. Every time I chose peace over truth, the lie learned it could grow. Do not hate yourself for believing us. Children are supposed to believe their parents. The shame belongs to the ones who used that belief. If your father says I wanted to be alone, remember this. I wanted you. I wanted your hand. I wanted your voice telling me the room was still real. You were not too much. You were not difficult. You were my brave girl. Tell the truth completely. Return what was stolen. Then build a life where love never requires you to disappear. At the bottom, she had written, I am sorry I left you the storm. But you were the only one who ever brought me light. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. The summer house has been restored. Not sold, not hidden, restored. The first room I repaired was the sunroom. I painted it pale yellow because Mom once said every house needed one room where morning could enter without asking permission. On the wall, I hung the photograph from her envelope, but I had it restored. Mom and Rebecca stand together now, whole again in the frame, young and unaware of the damage ahead. Beside it is a small brass key in a shadow box. People ask if it represents revenge. I tell them no. Revenge would have been destroying my father the way he tried to destroy her. What we did was different. We opened the locked room, we turned on the lights. We let everyone see what had been kept in the dark. My father said Mom wanted to be alone on her deathbed. Then I read her final letter. And I learned she had spent her last strength making sure I would never be alone with the truth. If someone in your family ever tells you that a loved one wanted peace, but peace somehow requires isolation, secrecy, and silence, ask questions. Ask who benefits from the quiet. Ask why the person at the center is not allowed to speak for themselves. Ask what paper was signed, by which hand, and who was in the room. Because sometimes the cruelest lie is spoken gently. Sometimes abandonment is disguised as respect. And sometimes the final act of love is not a goodbye. It is a warning. So tell me in the comments, if your parent left you a letter that contradicted everything your family said, would you confront them immediately, or would you gather proof first? Thank you for listening until the end. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, reflection, and discussion. It is not based on real people or real events. May it remind you that truth does not stop being truth because a family calls it betrayal, and that no one has the right to turn your silence into their alibi.